Welcome to the Grappling Grappling Rewind Podcast.
Welcome to this week on the Grappling Rewind Podcast. In this week's show, we're going to recap GrappleFest 12, we're going to recap Fight to Win 202, and we're going to recap the One Championships Tye Ruotolo versus Garry Tonon, and Kade Ruotolo versus Shinya Aoki. As always in the show, I'm here with Maine, the co-host.
Austin.
How you doing, Austin?
I am good, man. How are you?
You're doing good. It's good to have you back on. It's been... Actually, how long has it been? It's been like...
It has to be... Maybe years now.
It has been almost 2
Yeah.
years. You were away for a time, and now you returned, and we've been training. It's all good, but it's awesome to have you back in the show. Throwing you into a fun one here.
Hell yeah.
We have a little bit of news first, and some pretty big news. So let's jump into that first before we get into the recaps. Biggest news is three things. Who's Next is happening on Flow Grappling, and it's pretty interesting. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Gordon Ryan has signed 2 new bout agreements, one for Pedro Marinho as the, what's the word?
It's the finale for Who's Next.
Yeah, the finale for Who's Next. So that's actually a really fun matchup. I think Pedro's a guy that tends to push the action really, really hard. He did really, really well at Nogi Worlds. Do you know if he beat Cyborg at Nogi Worlds? Do you remember that?
I don't know if he beat Cyborg. The last thing I think I saw him on was Who's Number 1. He just beat Craig Jones for the light heavyweight championship.
Oh, yeah.
So that's the thing that, I think prompted him into kind of calling Gordon out. Like, hey, I'm the next best guy now at Nogi. I want a shot at Gordon. Right.
Which is cool. It's a matchup I'm happy about. And then the matchup that, again, really we want to see Gordon in 3 matchups. Felipe Pena got signed. Gordon Ryan, Felipe Pena are going to do it. It's Who's Number 1, right?
I think it's Who's Number 1. I don't remember exactly who's putting this one on, but I imagine it's Who's Number 1.
Yeah,
also.
it's Flo's doing it. I assume it is a main event for Who's Number 1. Do we know if it's pre-ADCC or post-ADCC?
It is. It's 1 month before ADCC, so it's on August 7th.
Okay, so if you don't know the history, let me recap it here. Gordon Ryan, Felipe Pena last fought in ADCC 2017, fought prior in a no time limit super fight at Studio 840 in Cali in a no time limit super fight. Pena beat Gordon both times. It is really the last big competition L on Gordon's record. It's the last submission loss he's had. And again, that's 20... Did he sub him at ADCC too?
I think it was ADCC. Yeah, I think in ADCC is when he got subbed, yeah.
He got subbed at Studio 540 because it was a rear naked choke off of a rear naked choke
for sure.
Yeah. ADCC, I don't remember. He lost twice, that's been the big one that everyone's like, hey, Felipe's the best guy, and Gordon's like, he's not. I've done a ton more since then. He is not. So now we finally get to settle it again for the final time, and I'm actually pretty excited about that. That is one of really, we want to see that match. We want to see the Galvao match for Gordon, and then I'd like to see him face Kenan Duarte again. Because Duarte is the hotness. Pedro Marinho is, again, definitely up there as well. It's a guy that I'm excited to see him. Again, we saw his match versus Couch recently, so Gordon's kind of back in the competition scene. Signing bouts finally. I'm excited to see him against the guys that I finally have wanted to see him for a couple of years against. Any kind of thoughts on that matchup before?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. The last time we saw Felipe Nogi, I think was BJJ Stars 8. So against Henrique Ciccone, I can't remember how to pronounce
that.
It
was a weird.
It was a weird match because Felipe pulled with no connection. He kind of stayed on his butt the entire time. He was playing positive jiu-jitsu while
so Tony kind of didn't really engage.
He didn't really engage him. Yeah, he kept kind of making disconnections, kind of getting half passes, but then not really making a connection to get all the way past his guard. So I don't know. Maybe that was a stylistic choice for Pena, who's getting ready for ADCC, knowing that hey, a guy will get a penalty if he doesn't engage me on my guard.
Right.
That's kind of what my thought was. So we don't really know how good Pena is at Nogi currently compared to how good Gordon is, which makes it more interesting of a matchup to me. So we saw Pena still smashing. He won Absolute Worlds this past go round.
Yeah.
So he's still really good, clearly.
Yeah.
And Gordon's coming off of this stomach ailment that we don't really know a whole lot about, but hasn't competed in a long time. Then he goes against a blue belt up and comer who's obviously really good, but is not at the same level as Pena. So it's we don't really know how good each one of them are.
The Philip Rowe match, or
either way, Philip Rowe or Jacob Couch.
Couch is a brown belt, isn't he?
Is he a brown belt now?
Yeah, I think he's brown belt.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah.
I stand corrected. Excuse me, but at the same time, still hasn't been.
I thought about Philip Rowe. I was Philip Rowe. I think is a blue belt.
I don't know what belt he is, to be honest. But still, game, but not at the same level as ADCC competitors.
Not ADCC absolute champion level guys like Galvao and Pena. I'm happy we're finally seeing it. We can finally stop. We've talked about this. We bullshitted this on the show for 4+ years now.
Of course, yeah.
I'm very happy to have it kind of definitively answer, like, look, both guys are coming in. Gordon's not competing. Pena, we saw him once.
I don't think we covered this, but it's no time limit, sub only.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty definitive. I don't think you can really say much after this match.
No, it's like the first match was in 2016. And so it's like, I'm happy that we're seeing it again. That's awesome. Before that, we're going to see Pedro Marinho, which is, again, a fun matchup. It is also interesting that it's going to happen a month before ADCC because we'll probably see that rematch again at ADCC under that rule set, which, again, we'll get the rematch of the Studio 840 match in 2016 at Who's Number One under the same rule set. And then we will get the 2017 ADCC rematch probably because Pena and Gordon are plus 99, so we're going to get that
Gordon
rematch
made this
as
kind
well.
of interesting observation that because it's so close to ADCC, he said it's a really bad decision for Pena. And it kind of makes sense, as much as I kind of don't want to agree with Gordon very publicly, but he basically said, if he loses, then where does he go from there for ADCC? Because they're not going to give him the match if Andre pulls out, because I will have already beaten him. This is obviously from Gordon, assuming he's going to beat Pena.
Yeah.
Then he's saying, okay, so where does he go from there? He knows he's not going to be able to beat me again. So he's postulating that he's not going to have enough time to pull out in time for ADCC, which I think is hilarious.
That's crazy.
But also, which I don't think he's going to. I don't think Pena's going to pull out of anything.
No.
But it's an interesting observation that it's so close to ADCC and they're in the same division, and then it's on the heels of the last super fight. So it's like, what's Pena going to do if he loses the fight prior? I think that's an interesting
That's such a weird
comment.
mental. It's Gordon playing mental games with guys he fights, and I think it's very funny because he's done that. It is finally one that I'm interested in thinking about because it's a matchup that I really care about. So that's news. Let's talk a little bit. Before we get into the recap for GrappleFest, let's talk a little bit about who's next because it's finally premiered. The first 2 episodes are out. Full disclosure, didn't realize the second episode was out. Didn't watch the second episode. Went through the first episode, which they're basically. So the first episode is basically the guys are fighting to get into the house. So they didn't have. They had more guys essentially in the first episode than they will have in the house, and it's basically like the Ultimate Fighter.
It's
if you've ever
exactly
seen that,
like that. Almost like fight your way into the house.
Yeah.
They have 16 guys enter. 8 guys will make it into the house. So they kind of made the initial matchups. To me, it seemed pretty even, relatively evenly, because they have guys of all different backgrounds, all different weight classes.
They had guys that were like down at like 145, and then you have Big Dan, who's like, what is he, 295 or something?
He's close to 300, if not.
Yeah, he's a big boy.
Yeah,
and so
like
I was kind of like, well, that's kind of a weird thing that they're doing it open weight. And so if they're doing it open weight, then who the fuck is going to beat Big Dan? And we're going to kind of see more of his personality and all the personalities. There are, of all the results I didn't pull up, I didn't pull up the results for this one. The first episode's out. It is essentially like The Ultimate Fighter, and then the format is like Shugio and like the Lord Irving Kumite, which is basically no time limit, submission only. I don't care how long the match goes.
Yeah.
You submit him. And Adam Bradley had almost a 3-hour match on this one.
Yeah.
Do you pull it up in the time that I stalled for you to pull it up?
Like who won, who didn't?
Yeah. Do you have all the results of it?
Yeah.
For the first episode there?
Yeah.
So who did he go against in the first episode? While I struggle to pull through this.
Yeah. Adam Bradley had Tristan Overvig.
Yeah.
Almost 3 hours. There was, I don't know, this was like an escape clinic and then just a war of attrition. Any match that lasts 3 hours and in the last 2 minutes of the match, which is right at the 3 hour mark almost.
I think it's 2:52 or something like that.
That sounds right. That's what they played in the highlight.
That's close enough to 3 hours. I'll give you 3 hours.
Right. So I don't know. There's maybe like 4 or 5 submissions that Tristan threw up.
I think, and then
threw up an arm triangle, an arm bar.
He gets out of a rear naked choke.
A rear naked.
Then he gets out of.
I think it was like 2 arm locks.
No, he gets out of the arm triangle. Then he gets off the back, rear naked choke, and then he gets out of the arm bar.
Yeah.
And then Bradley gets on his back.
Yep.
And finishes him. And it was just like...
Yeah, he finished him with like a
shit.
no hooks in rear naked choke after like 2 hours and 50-something minutes. And it's pretty insane. You can now watch on Flow. You can watch the full matches. I didn't watch the full matches. I watched the episode as it was.
Yeah.
And they do a really good job of editing.
They did it exactly like Shugio did it a couple years ago, where it's like, hey, we get these matches are going to go real long. We're going to cut up highlights of it, like the best moments that are the most interesting transitions and sequences or subs or escapes, so that you can see those, because that's what you want to see anyway. You probably don't want to watch 8 minutes of these guys in the knee cut
Sure.
Like, because again, guys aren't really incentivized to like push the action if that is not their game plan.
Right.
So you get just a cut down version. I think it's actually a really good way to do it. It makes the format something that you can watch without needing to watch 10, hour matches where it's like there's a lot of guys playing to, hey, we're going to have a no time limit match.
For sure.
That a lot of times is not very viewer
And I'm
friendly.
sure video footage wise, it's great to have that much content to be able to sift through and edit down into something that's like much more palatable for the common person who just wants some entertainment.
Bro, I'm the
They're
uncommon person.
understanding
I want that's what I want them to do. I
For
appreciate
sure.
that somebody else went and did that, and I did not have to tab through a 3+ hour match and then a 45-minute match, and then like they're cool sometimes, and I'll probably at some point honestly get on a trip and sit down and watch it.
Sure.
Because that's what kind of person I am. But
Aren't we all?
covering it this week on the show, was very happy that it was cut down, and it's honestly like. There's been some kind of different reactions online about it, but I'm pretty happy with it. Like, it's interesting. You're seeing a lot of the personalities from a lot of the guys. Interestingly enough, Austin and I talked earlier for the pre-show when this was filmed. So I think this is definitely filmed before trials because we were
100%.
seeing footage previewing this prior to trials. And I talked to some guys about this at trials, not like in any depth or anything they couldn't say, but like just like basically, oh, that's a thing that's happening. And based on how much footage they had cut up and how long the thing ran, it couldn't have been done in March. So it was probably done in February or in like January of this year, I'm guessing. So there's a lot of guys in the bracket here that we saw at trials. Like Andy Varela is here.
Yep.
He gets tapped in the first round. He has an injury that then later goes on and has an amazing performance at trials. But it's like,
sure.
trials was 4 months later probably. Jay Rodriguez gets tapped, doesn't get into the house either.
Exactly, yep.
Again, 4-5 months later, depending when this was filmed, has an amazing run at trials, beats Hunter Colvin in the finals. Actually, funny enough, J-Rod gets subbed in the first round here via buggy choke.
Yeah, he does.
And then later again goes to win trials via buggy choke. And it's just a very interesting thing that was probably 3 to 4 months minimum before trials. So...
Right.
Overall, really interesting event. Austin, you kind of have any... You watched actually the second episode and the first episode.
Yeah, I did,
Do you have any other kind of takeaways or points or interesting pieces of matches that you can point to?
I would just say check it out if you're a big fan of getting to know some of the personalities behind grappling, because some of these guys will definitely be future people to watch. And then it'll really flavor ADCC trials if you haven't watched some of these matches. Some of the trials winners are, like Maine said, are in the show. So it really kind of give you some insight into... high-level grappling, people who are up and coming, some of their mentality, and then just a fun show, just like any other reality show. There's going to be team challenges.
Yeah, it's Tim Spriggs and Craig Jones. If you don't know their history, I think I know they've gone against each other for grappling issues in Philly. That was a no time limit, and Craig got the sub there. For some reason, I think they faced each other before that as well, but I don't know. I think I got this one wrong. But regardless, it'll be interesting. I think they're also probably going to have a match at the end.
They're be on the
would be
finale.
my guess.
Yep.
Which again is I'm curious to see if the dynamics of that match change because Craig took that pretty handily last time, but Tim Spriggs has made big changes and improvements, especially now being the Who's Number One champion.
Yep.
I think the dynamics of that match will be very, very interesting as Craig has struggled a little bit recently in some of his matches that have not been, as not stylistically favorable, but, he hasn't been able to play his game as he once did.
Sure.
Now that guys have such a good understanding of exactly what he wants to do.
Sure.
So, super excited to see more of it. Again, I'll watch the second episode probably after this. Probably not tonight because we started this recording about midnight.
Yeah.
But I'm excited for it. So, moving on. You want to do One FC first, or you want to do GrappleFest first?
Totally up to you, man.
All right, let's do. That does it for news. Any other news? Another news?
I think that's the big stuff.
Okay, big stuff. Probably forgot stuff because, again, midnight recording shows we always do. Last week I bobbled and I thought One FC versus Kade Ruotolo versus Garry Tonon and Tye Ruotolo versus Garry Tonon and Kade Ruotolo versus Shinya Aoki. I thought this was May 30th.
Oh yeah, that's
not
right.
May 20th. So we didn't preview it. It went kind of how I thought it was going to go. I did think Kade was going to sub Aoki.
I did too, yeah.
But I thought Tye would Darce Garry. I thought it would be in about 4 minutes. I did not think it would be in about 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, it was very early on. There's a lot of cool highlight kind of moments, but I think the one thing that really stood out in my mind And some of the announcers were kind of saying this on the stream. They were saying, I wonder how the Ruotolo twins are going to deal with the dynamic of being in a cage for the first time. And if you think about how they rolled in both of their matches, so Kade had this spot where he jumps off of the cage.
In like a outside single leg, double leg kind of.
It was almost like a guard. It was like a guard pull almost, but he ends up like wrapping around to Shinya's back, which was was probably like the highlight moment of that match.
Yeah.
And you think about how Garry got finished. It was up against the cage, and Tye locks in a Darce, like kind of where Garry is having a tough time escaping because his feet are kind of suspended in the air up against the cage in like a north-southy kind of position. So as he's trying to invert, he can't really because he's blocked by the cage, which is like, okay, well, here are these two non-MMA fighters who are using the cage to their advantage kind of better than the two MMA fighters. I thought that was really cool.
Especially how like, they talk about when Shinya was coming out, like 15 years of watching him walk out to this. I'm like, oh, goddamn, I've been watching Shinya for a gang of time.
Right.
And it's just wild to see like that. The commentary call that out, and then they're like, yeah, bro, we're the Ruotolo brothers. Doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah,
like,
we're
sure. Just that good.
And I just think they train so often. I'd be really shocked if they've not done wall drills just for the fuck
Have
of
you
it.
seen their garage?
Oh.
How many times they just bang into like these kids?
They go to war. They like there's like there's some behind the scenes footage of them like fighting each other in a hotel room.
I love that. That made me laugh so because they're like fighting.
It's amazing.
It reminds
it's big brother little brother fights at the highest level
of Wagner and Achilles. Like there's a video of like they're in their living room, they're like punching. It's like this is Wagner, ex UFC fighter, like former MMA Jiu-Jitsu, like really good guy, and his son Achilles, like, and they're like fighting, and like Wagner's wife is like yelling at him like, run on the house,
yeah,
and they're just like fighting, and I was like, oh yeah, this is how like fight families kind of like this is what they're doing, and then it's like play. It's obviously very playful. Kade and Tye was a little less playful.
It was a little more heated, I think.
Yeah, because I think Tye has like a bloody face after that. He's like nose
one of them has
is
a
broken
bloody
or
lip.
something.
I can't remember which one. And then they're saying like, oh, you would have died in my buggy choke. It's like, no, I would have got you with this or that. It's like it's great. It's classic.
The dynamics
like,
of the brothers are great.
Stuff. Yeah.
It was really cool to see them both walk out and like in Singapore in that arena, and like Tye. Kade came out and did like the T-pose thing for like the fire check, and Tye just like dapped him up. I was like, and like he was gonna like he was gonna check him like a referee.
Yeah.
And then he just like smacked the shit out of him and like got him hype, and then he walked into Kade, and then the referee checked him after. I was like, man, these two brothers were like.
Can you imagine competing for so much of your life that you can coach your brother to a win, be hyped, stoked the entire time, adrenaline, had this crazy adrenaline dump from watching like, pretty much your best friend just roll, and then just roll with one of like the most exciting grapplers on the planet 2 minutes later, like you're the very next match, then you submit him very quickly. It's like, man, these dudes are studs, and it was a really fun event. I'm really glad
I watched the whole thing.
Yeah.
I was working remote and got a chance to watch it while I was working off and on between meetings, and watch like the replay because it's on YouTube, so you can pause it and you can watch it again, catch the live stream. It was again, I like watching one. I'm a huge fan that they are really signing a bunch of people. I missed it last week. I talked about a couple of the signings, but they signed a bunch more people last week. They signed Hanato Kanuto, they signed Jessica Khan, and they signed Tynan Daupra.
That's awesome.
So, and there's some discussion about like if their contracts are structured like Gordon's contract, where it's like, look, you're exclusive for MMA. You ever decide to fight MMA, you do it with us, but you can grapple wherever and do ADCC. And there is some discussion if like those guys can only grapple with One FC and also like MMA, but I would be surprised if a lot of those guys would agree to that.
I doubt they would.
But again, if Chatri is giving guys $50K for some of these matches pretty frequent, like Daniel Kelly got $50K, Mikey Musumeci got $50K, like
Tye did this last one.
Tye got $50K, like that is more money than you're gonna make in ADCC as the champion for like. I wouldn't.
I doubt there's.
I'm gonna fight exclusively. Like making $50K a time isn't necessarily a bad way to do it, and I have an organization that's gonna take care of me. They're gonna fly me out. It's like, hey, that might be the way to do it. Kind of like the MMA style
with the grappling stuff, just because there's so much, and this word keeps coming up in our last few conversations, there's so much prestige to winning some of these titles that a lot of these young up-and-comers, some of these people are already established.
I think for Tye and Kade, again, they just won Brown Belt Worlds, and like in that great match, like I think in the black belt ranks up and comers, like newer people in the black belt ranks that have not won the black belt titles that mean so much in the sport.
Sure.
And I think that's interesting.
And even for people like Tynan, who's won, but he still wants to cement his legacy as a multiple-time winner, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I doubt he would sign some exclusivity thing that prevents him from doing that.
I would too. I just think that we're seeing more and more of jiu-jitsu sort of start to go the MMA route again, especially after seeing like who's next. It's kind of a tough clone in that way. Like, if guys are now approaching it as a professional athlete, looking to make money as a business doing the sport, we might start to see more exclusive deals like this where it's like, yeah, I'm only going to compete with you. Why? Because you're paying me on your roster as a guy. But it is interesting to see one have such a great product. I think they're on Amazon Prime coming up soon.
Yeah, for the United States, they're going to be on Amazon
Which
Prime.
I'm like, I have that anyway, but it's like,
it'd be great
the
for
production
exposure.
quality is great. I love that it's not just,
Oh my God, it's great.
berated with commercials the entire time.
Yep.
Like, it flows well. There was great Muay Thai fights. There was, depending on how you want to see the result of that fight.
Sure.
There was fun kickboxing. There was good MMA. Like, overall, the last couple of cards I've watched, for one, have been phenomenal. I've really enjoyed it. I like that they are showcasing super high-level grappling talent because it makes us look good as grapplers. And it, like, shows, like, hey, these guys can be exciting and they can put on good matches and they can push the pace and action. And, like, one has a variety of rules anyway. They know how to deal with different sports. Like, hey, kickboxing, MMA, and like they know how to combine it in a package to kind of satisfy a lot of different things and showcase like
100%
really high level talent. So I'm happy
I stuck
about
around and watched like the Small Gloves Muay Thai, which I'm not necessarily a super big follower of. I love watching kickboxing and high level Muay Thai as well, but it's, comes and goes, but because I was already watching the card, I was like, yeah, I'll stick around and watch it.
Yeah.
Hopefully that same thing happens with some of the fans of striking who want to watch some grappling that happens to be on the same card.
Right. And again, they're putting in their MMA fighters as well. Like Shinya and Garry are both on the One FC roster as MMA fighters, and having crossover matches like that, I think, is a really interesting way to bring that kind of additional viewership into the fold.
For sure.
Especially because Garry literally just fought for a title, and he's been crushing through everyone who's previously undefeated there. You then see this undefeated guy that has, he only lost to the champion.
Right.
And like he was doing jiu-jitsu, and then you see him versus this guy. If you don't watch jiu-jitsu, you probably don't know who Tye Ruotolo is.
Right.
And then you see like, oh, he submitted the guy that's known as the jiu-jitsu guy in the division in 2.5 minutes. Who the fuck is that guy?
Yeah.
That puts new eyes on the sport. I think that's only a good thing, and I'm very excited. Again, we're continuing to cover One FC more and more, and again, amazing finish from Kade.
For sure.
I thought that he would finish, but I did not think it would be that quick. And I'm surprised at how clean it was. And he also has a freakish build. I think it's underrated how, like...
After watching this, the way he finished, the finishing mechanics, it makes me think he must have some otherworldly squeeze. Because Garry Tonon's arm wasn't all the way straight, which, I have baby T-Rex arms, so I need people's arms to kind of, like, their delt to be touching their... neck if I finish the Darce.
Both brothers, they are very, very long
wiry.
armed.
Yeah.
I think that they can do stuff and they can squeeze and Darce.
Yeah, I think their Darces and their buggies are unnaturally strong.
Yeah.
For their overall
stature.
Size. Yeah, their size, like their weight, but probably have like otherworldly squeeze because they've been doing it for so long.
Yeah.
So like I said, Garry Tonon's arm was almost at like a 90 at one point, which is usually like, not enough.
He's pretty safe.
Yeah, generally pretty safe.
Not safe, but like,
but you can
you're not
some
getting
time.
choked there.
And I don't know, that squeeze seemed like it came on really quickly, considering.
It was wild. Again, very happy to see it. Very curious to see when we start seeing like not rematches, when we start seeing them rebook a lot of the grappling. Because a lot of times we've only seen Garry, I think, in 1 or 2 of these matches. We saw him face Shinya before, but it was been a while. I'm curious if we're gonna see like what Gordon talked about on a while ago on one of the podcasts. Like they are creating a league, and like we're gonna start seeing like, oh, these are the One FC rankings for jiu-jitsu and grappling.
Yeah,
like,
that'd be really cool.
That would be really cool, I think, because most of these guys are getting paid. Yeah, and I like to see jiu-jitsu people getting paid for what they do, and again, that's awesome. So
for sure.
Any other things I want to see?
I think that about does it.
So let's move on. Let's talk about GrappleFest 12. This one was headlined by Dante Leon versus PJ Barch. We're only going to talk about a couple of the matches on this card, just because that's usually how we do it. Where do you want to start? You want to start with main card, or do you want to start with like the Michael Pixley and Owen Livesley match?
Yeah, that's a good one to start
click off of the results page that I had. Cool. Let's talk with that match. So this was This was a match. Pixley is a Daisy Fresh guy. Oh, don't find that on the web, Siri. Don't do that. Pixley is a guy from Daisy Fresh. He is a blue belt, one blue belt world. I think he's still blue belt. He might be a purple belt now.
Hopefully, purple if he's already won worlds, But
he looked
that
good.
is what it is.
He looked good at U.S. trials. He is a D2 wrestler. Owen Livesley. Actually, you looked it up earlier on the show. We've talked about his judo credentials before and like his wrestling credentials before. He's a 2014 Commonwealth Games gold medalist in judo.
Yeah.
Which means like, oh yeah, that kind of speaks to like how good his judo is, which makes a lot of sense. This match was basically, this was a wrestling match. This was a takedown battle.
Yeah, takedown battle is probably the best way to put it, right? Like, I guess you wouldn't see as many like foot sweep attempts. There was a ton from Livesy. A lot of like Dayashi Burai kind of setups. There's one where he pushes him out of bounds, and it kind of like looks like it almost like injures his back.
Yeah, there's a takedown that Owen hits on Pixley, and they sort of end up, and I think there was like a covered column or something next to the stage or something. It was like it looked like soft.
There was something that he ran his
but
back
but he
into,
ran it. But Pixley leans into something, and immediately like you can see him hit like hard and go and like he's complaining about his back. He kind of walks over to Keith Pedro, kind of complaining about his back, and I think Keith gives him talk like, "Hey, we're in England. Like, get out there. Like, we've gone this far. Like, come on, keep going." And he does. But that really slowed down Pixley after that kind of like takedown and out of bounds. He just like took a little of the wind out of his sails. He was definitely on the back foot for a good portion of this match. Livesley was really like, I don't use the word punishing, but like continually putting forward pressure, shooting, and just putting a pace on Pixley that Pixley didn't really. Pixley seemed to have wanted to take a slower pace for this match, and Owen immediately got on him and did not let him do that, and started pulling in his head, pulling him down, pulling him through, and like I think there was also a strength differential here. Like Owen looked to be the stronger guy, and looked to be leveraging that strength, especially in like the clinches and in like some of the sequences to pull Pixley down in a way that like Pixley was sort of definitely towards the end of the match. 8-minute, 10-minute match.
This one was a 10-minute, I think.
Yeah, towards the end of the match, like definitely started to like slow down even more. And again, Owen towards the end of the match also slowed down.
It was pretty interesting. I thought like a lot of the takedown attempts on both ends kind of ended up in either like a top or bottom turtle position. Even like one of the very first ones, Owen kind of gets tilted after he runs like a pretty tight double, and it ends up almost on the edge of the mat. And but he kind of gets like rolled through, like almost like not really a funk roll, is kind of locked around the body. But Owen kind of gets tilt. He kind of gets this tilt that puts him on top and turtle. But a lot of those takedown attempts ended up like that way, where like the only thing that happened was both their knees touched the ground. Pixley had a really good.
What's that term in wrestling? It's like they're basically you're head to head, where you both have the collar tie, and one guy's not like all the way turtled.
You're gonna ask me about a wrestling term, dude? I don't know.
I don't know either. That's why I asked you. We're jiu-jitsu guys, Austin.
Yeah.
So like Rob be like, "Hey Rob, what's this position?"
He probably knows the word for it. And it's probably something that has nothing
honestly,
to do with how it looks.
It's wrestling. There's probably not a term for it. Well, just head to head.
Yeah. Or you mean head to head?
I asked someone. We trained wrestling, but we trained this morning and we trained this evening, 2 different times. And there was a wrestler in the gym, a younger guy, and he did something. And I was like, "What's that called in wrestling?" He goes, "I don't know, man. I just go behind."
Yeah.
He just looked at me like there's not a name for this. I just do that. And he said, I don't think there's a name for it. I just do it.
Yeah.
And like there's been so many times over the years that I've asked a wrestling guy that question, and they're just like, "I don't know, man. You just like do it."
Yeah.
And it's like you don't have any names for anything. Whereas jiu-jitsu guys
What's that
love
move
names.
where you pass the head? Head pass. Cool, man.
Yeah. So yeah, probably not a name for it. But most of the takedowns for this match, or the takedown attempts for this match, ended up in that sequence where they're head to head, one guy's head is below, or they're like just still even in head position, and neither are really able to continue the shot or to reshoot off
if
of
you
it.
Think of like just like a really clean sprawl off of like a double. That's kind of like that position they ended up in. One person's on top, one person's on bottom, but it doesn't really turn into any sort of ground control sort of position.
Yeah, because neither guy was willing to go to guard. And the other guy that was either shooting for the takedown wasn't close enough to the hips or the arms or anything to either hit like a drag or to hit a drive through or like a double or a single or a switch.
I think there's a perfect example of that. It's like maybe like 6 minutes left in the match, and Pixley kind of snatches this really clean ankle pick, but Owen just kind of like spins out.
Yeah.
Gets back to like both of his knees and then just stands straight up because there's so much distance between the two of them, because neither one of them really had enough control to kind of pin the other one down for long enough to get any control on the ground.
So that was really the match.
Yeah.
Again, Owen has nasty foot sweeps.
Sure.
And there was 2 times in the match that it really caught Pixley off guard and like almost swept him over. And I was like, ooh. And it wasn't the bullshit foot sweep where like you kick the guy in the leg and he falls over. Yeah. It was like, oh yeah, Owen is a really high level judoka that has like adapted this particular move into nogi. And for me, it's very validating because I've spent the past like 4 months working this fucking foot sweep. And I'm like, cool, there's a guy, again, much bigger, much stronger, but there's a guy in modern jiu-jitsu that can use this effectively versus higher level guys. It's cool to see that technique, the Ashi Barai, being used effectively in this scenario.
For sure. If you want to look at somebody who's like the epitome of like what modern, I guess you could call it like nogi judo would be, I think he's a good person to follow.
Yeah. Yeah, and again, we love watching him because he typically has really exciting. Again, he pushed the pace. At no point does this become a boring wrestling match. They moved like consistently, but he usually gets a bite at one point and just Greco's a guy over, or suplexes a guy over.
I know what you meant.
So that was the match. Any other pieces on that match?
No, I think we covered it pretty good.
So moving on to the next match, Jacob Couch versus Tom Breeze. Jacob Couch. I'm gonna go. This is the entire match. Jacob Couch pulls guard. Tom Breeze comes into the guard, and then Tom Breeze stays on his knees and does not attempt to pass the guard for 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it was closed guard with Couch kind of just picking at him for the entire time.
He kind of worked a lot of rubber guard stuff and outside control. Like Couch tried to get stuff going. He shot for some
He opened his guard a
guillotines.
bunch of times. I mean, there was the opportunity for Breeze to pass, I thought, in a few different ways, but I also think there's this thing of, and Breeze is a black belt, but I think it's this thing of where if you do MMA long enough...
If you don't know, Tom Breeze is a former UFC fighter, prolific English MMA fighter, been around for a long time, still fights at a very high level.
Yep.
But so he's coming into... He's been on GrappleFest before. He's been on Polaris before. But coming into face Couch, a straight-up jiu-jitsu guy,
right?
You're looking at a dynamic there.
I think when these MMA guys... I'm saying that almost like as a pejorative, and it's not. I think a lot of times when they have these pure grappling matches, I don't want to say they feel this way because I can't speak to how someone feels, but their body language to me suggests that they're really comfortable with being on top and not having to progress unless they feel comfortable progressing. Right. And what I mean by that is, if I'm on top on your guard, in my mind, I might be winning because I am on top on a more dominant position just by virtue of being on top.
Right.
Where in this grappling, especially a submission-only setting, that's not necessarily the case.
Right.
And then also, I think that's kind of a face-saving thing, right? Like, if you have a very public-facing job as an MMA fighter, you don't want to get embarrassed. You don't want to get dunked on by like some guy no one's heard of.
By some random jiu-jitsu guy.
So if I can stay on top and kind of control this fight, the people who maybe are MMA fans and not grappling fans who watch me fight, so to speak, in these submission events might see that I was on top the entire time. Okay, you're still my favorite. You're still really good. I don't care about this rule set where
and
nothing
this
happened.
This is something we've seen, and we saw this in the Bradley match versus Craig Jones. Like we saw really again, that was a little bit of a different dynamic there, and there's some other things that happened there. But where you have an MMA fighter on top that doesn't really look to significantly progress the match.
Like negative fighting is almost like negative fighting to a draw almost feels like a win because I was on top the entire time.
And I didn't get submitted by the guy really good at the thing we were doing.
The best example / worst thing that almost ever happened in jiu-jitsu ever.
You bring it up?
Yeah.
All right.
Schaub and Cyborg. See, I didn't even have to say it. You know exactly what I meant.
No,
Cyborg and Schaub.
You gave me the eyes, and I was like, I know exactly what match.
And this is not to beat a dead horse, which is like a zombie horse at this point.
We haven't beat that horse in a long time, so like, if you haven't seen the match, it is Brendan Schaub versus Cyborg Abreu and Metamoris 2.
That sounds right.
And Matt, by the way, for years, this match was really hard to find on the internet. Like, it was really, really hard. Like, I looked for like 2 hours one day, and I'm good at what we do, finding matches.
Sure.
It had been like scrubbed from the internet.
I don't blame whoever did it, but
it's basically like the entire time Schaub doesn't engage Cyborg's guard because Schaub has intended to try to submit Cyborg in a scramble during a takedown attempt, and then Cyborg was injured, so just immediately pulled, and it fucked up Schaub's game plan, and nothing happened for the entirety of the match, and it's one of the worst.
It's really boring.
Matches.
If nothing happens where you don't, one person decides to not engage, that's totally a viable strategy if you want nothing to happen.
Right.
That's exactly what quote unquote happened, like nothing. So
Jacob Couch gets the win here because he was attempting stuff from the guard. Sure. I think that Breeze played from the knees most likely because you saw the most recent match that Couch had, or not the most recent match because he had trials after this, but Couch is really good at leg lock entries from the bottom.
Oh, yeah.
So if you play on your knees, it makes it really hard to get underneath you.
For sure.
And so Breeze went, yeah, I'm not going to stand in front of this guy because he's going to rip my leg off. I'm going to play from the guard, and I will, if a pass opportunity comes and ability to do stuff from the guard, I will do it. But if
100%.
one doesn't come, I am absolutely not going to stand up next to this guy because Jacob Couch is one of the best guys at that weight class at getting under you and trying to break your legs off.
Yeah, so. It's not worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze, so to speak, for putting yourself at risk for a lot of the guys who have MMA careers.
Next match, we had John Thor Blank taking on Owen O'Flanagan for the under 90 kilogram title. Owen takes this via triangle, and I was shocked watching this. I didn't, because again, we watched this match, and I was like, okay, we previewed this match, and I was like, I think we previewed this versus a different opponent. I'm not sure if we previewed it versus Owen O'Flanagan, but we may have. I was like, John is probably going to leg lock Owen. Like, he's really good at it.
Yeah.
We haven't seen him since the injury he took versus Jacob Couch, but Thor does a couple of things really well. Pretty good wrestler, but man, he is good at breaking your leg off from the bottom. And Owen is going to be able to come in close to him and let him get into his leg.
Yeah, this is a pretty active match compared to some of the other ones that we just discussed. There's a lot of shin to shin that Thor got to, which I thought was going to end up in like some pretty tight leg locking positions. He started working a toe hold at one point where he sweeps off of it. And he passes even at some point. It was a bit of a grind between those two interactions happening, but he is sweeping to a pass. And so, I was thinking it was kind of going Thor's way.
I think
for the
definitely,
most part.
and like in the wrestling, in the stand up, in the passing, and like in the areas that the match was happening, Thor was usually getting the jump.
Yeah,
and then like 10 minutes in or something like that, or 8 minutes in,
it's pretty close to the end of the matchup.
I don't have time here, but like later in the match. Owen's on the bottom, and he is like an open guard, hands in the middle. Thor is coming in off like a reset, and then Owen reaches up with his inside right foot. He kind of flicks at Thor's leg. Thor kind of like
definitely off balance.
We couldn't tell if he like got off balance or Thor slipped because maybe. It kind of looked like both. It looked like it was something that Owen. We watched this a bunch of times before the show, on the pre-show. It looked like a combination of like, yes, Owen is intentionally doing something here to off-balance Thor, but Thor like doesn't overreact, but looks like he slips in conjunction to Owen like pushing him here,
for sure,
and falls right into a triangle that Owen has ready.
Yeah, I thought the grips were really interesting too. I don't know what you call this gripping. Maybe we'll have to ask another wrestler. But almost like that mercy grip where your fingers are interlocked with one hand.
I think everyone just calls it a mercy grip.
Oh, really?
Everyone just calls it
made that up.
Yeah. Really?
Well, I didn't. I didn't invent
literally,
it.
Yeah, everyone calls it the mercy grip.
Yeah,
that's literally what everyone calls it.
Okay, so one hand's like that. I think it's his right hand in this case. Had like this mercy grip, and then the other hand was kind of in like a wrist, like overhand wrist grip.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like the ideal triangle gripping sequence we see very commonly, but I think that off balancing just gave him this perfect opportunity to throw his legs up. He snags it. Thor's sitting on his butt during the finish
because Thor has his leg almost up in the arm, and there was an interesting gripping sequence that happened here at the end. Is Owen reaches under, he locks the triangle and he makes some adjustments to basically get a really deep triangle. Thor kind of tries to come over top of the shoulder of the leg that Owen has, and then you see Owen like power grip under the arm, like he's going to try to violent arm lock Thor from the triangle, which is a really common sequence you see. But Thor does basically goes, okay, if I lift my arm, he buries his arm. And he's like, if I lift my arm up, I'm going to get arm locked by the violent arm lock by Owen here. So I'm going to keep burying it. I'm going to try to roll over and pull my head out of this triangle. But it's a battle of basically like, can they finish the triangle versus can they get the arm out?
Sure.
And you have to make a judgment call. Like, if Thor lets the arm out, he's going to get arm locked here. There's no way. He can't pull out of it any further. So his best bet is to bury it and to try to pull out of the triangle. But because you don't have the leverage of pushing your arm forward, it makes it really hard to come out of the triangle either forward or around. And so Owen's just able to kind of power and finish on it in like a way that we don't see super often.
Play with those two submissions. And I thought that was really cool. Like I said, that was a pretty action-packed match, pretty active the entire time. So that's definitely one to go back and watch if you like those sorts of matches.
Yeah, it was fun again, and a really I think an upset finish.
Yeah,
for how the match was going,
for sure.
And like you looked at it on paper, like definitely an upset finish. But again, really interesting. Go back and watch it's on Fight TV. Go back and watch the sequence that Owen hits here with his legs. Like, it's a really interesting little inside leg position that kind of off balances Thor. And it reminds me a little bit of Felipe Andrew versus Keenan and Felipe Andrew versus Hulk. Like that really quick triangle he hit on both of them off of like a really kind of varied setup. We're seeing more and more guys from their guard shoot triangles like this off of like particular little setups that you wouldn't think would be very much, but they're able to lock up really deep, like successful triangles off of it. And it reminded me of both of those matches in like, I didn't really like know how he set that up, but on rewatch, it's really interesting. So it definitely really, really nice finishing sequence here for Owen and a big, big win for him. Next match, this is a fun match.
Yeah.
We had Ash Williams versus Keith Krikorian. This was a battle of like systematic leg lock offense and systematic leg lock defense.
100%. So it's really a shootout from the beginning. There were so many outside leg lock entries from Krikorian. If you are a big fan of those sorts of setups, I would say study that. And if you are not a fan of having it done to you, study it for the opposite reason, because Ash Williams is pretty much a master at kind of breaking these entries and these setups up. There were a ton of entries.
I love the entries that in my game, the entries that Krikorian does are very similar to the ones I'm looking to implement into my game. So to watch what Ash Williams is doing in this match, like, oh yeah, that's how I like to set it up. And then you'd watch Ash, like, you watch him step on the outside or step over, just like the systematic, like there was no, the thing that struck me the most about this match, especially in the beginning of the match, but even throughout the match, was you would see Keith basically, we've covered Keith for years and years and years.
Sure.
You know his game. You know what it looks like. You know how he's going to implement it. You know how he's going to put it. So he goes to the outside heel hook, and then you just see Ash like look, and he would identify it, and then he would do one of like a couple of different defenses that were always correct, and they were never like scrambly. Like it was never Ash like, oh no, I'm getting caught in this, I got to scramble out. It was him always like, oh, he's going for this entry. I'm going to put my leg here,
it was
my
very
hand on the
calculated.
foot. I'm going to turn my hips out. I'm going to free my knee. Or, oh, I'm going to turn my knee here. I'm going to counterattack this with a position. I'm going to counterattack this by dragging my own leg over. It was
it's
just
100% the meta of no-gi sub only, where people play butterfly or shin to shin for elevation, and then they do an inversion if they get smashed, or they go an elevation into an outside sort of setup for a leg lock.
Yeah.
And there's so much counter leg locking. So not just, oh, how do I break up this leg lock, but how do I get back into my own offensive leg locking from that same sort of setup?
It was
really good.
It was just an amazing match. I mean, I don't want to just like recap like play by play the match because there were so many great moments that were that. They were Keith or even Ash. Ash had some good entries himself into leg locks. There were two like pretty deep leg lock entries that he had in Krikorian. And then towards the end of the match, so that the first probably 10 minutes of the match, was it a 14-minute match or was it a 10-minute match? I don't remember. This wasn't a title match. I thought Ash had the title before, but it might not be anymore. I don't remember. But the first 80% of the match is this really, really nice leg lock, back and forth, a mixture of wrestling and counter wrestling and really interesting leg lock entries and defenses from both guys in a way that it's like a lot of the sub-only guys, again, like I said earlier, it's going to be this weird, like, oh, he scrambled out of that. And you're like, oh, yeah, he kind of like, he did the right things, but he was just trying to do them all at once and like free and then pull out. Versus Ash really, like you can actually watch this match and watch what Ash was doing.
Right.
Like every step, kind of like the match Gordon Ryan versus Jacob Couch. It happens at a speed where you can like watch Gordon make the right decisions for how to address the false reap to unravel it and get his leg out safely. Ash was doing the same things. Keith would go for it. Ash would go, okay, his foot's here. I need to put my leg on the outside here. I need to put my toes down. I need to put my hands in the way, put them under, then pull this leg through a little bit, then make the angle, then pull the leg all the way out, and then re-engage. And it was like, oh, you can see him doing that. It's not just, oh shit, rip my leg through.
Right.
And then towards the end of the match, we see Ash get into like reverse mount.
Yeah, it ended up becoming like a north-south sort of position, and he kind of had this Kimura, almost like a north-south Kimura that turned into an armbar. And I think that's what the judges saw was the most recent thing, the most recent submission attempt.
Yeah,
we had a pretty good talk about this, but basically, I think there's a recency bias, and this is one of my pet peeves with Nogi sub only, or really any sub only, is that whatever.
We don't see a lot of sub only in gi. Elite Fight to Win
true.
Does it.
That's true.
But like
Locals or something, but
most events
not high level.
are like we see sub only in Nogi.
Sure. So sub only. This is one of my pet peeves is that there's a recency bias. So you see this like submission getting thrown up at the end and it looks close, and you kind of forget about the beginning and the middle of the match where like pretty much just as viable submissions were being thrown.
Yeah.
Or you kind of throw that out the window like, hey, this guy might have had 4 attempts, but this last attempt looked really sexy, and this is kind of what happened.
Yeah.
I think Keith was kind of winning.
Ash
It
had
was such a close
at the
match.
end. Ash had, and we couldn't see the camera because it was behind it. Ash gets a really nice like armbar entry into like I couldn't really tell how deep.
Yeah,
it
looked
was.
like a north-south Kimura that turned into an armbar. And it looked like Keith was starting to get out of it, but you can't really tell.
Because it was
the
back. It
camera's
was
facing
back to
behind
it.
them.
Yeah, and it was like I don't want to speak on how close it was
Sure.
because I know Keith is notoriously amazingly difficult to sub.
Sure.
Like even that his first EBI entrance when he was a purple belt after winning the qualifier or getting the late entrant after the qualifier was like the commentator didn't really have a lot, they didn't really know about him very well. So like, oh yeah, he's really hard to sub. And I was like, man, that's the only thing for the guy. And then I watched him be really hard to sub, and I was like, oh, I watch a lot of jiu-jitsu. He's really hard to sub.
Yeah.
So with watching this match versus Ash on this one, I can't really tell how deep it was because Keith is not a good metric for like tap into shit.
Sure.
But again, like Austin said, like you said, it's a recency. Like Keith had, this was one, whatever the judges decided,
Sure.
You can make an argument for.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think it was a bad call necessarily. I mean,
So Ash takes this via decision.
Yeah, he takes it via decision. I think the pass and going to north-south and kind of holding him there for a few seconds. I think
he was on top for like
on top for
almost
a good
2
bit.
minutes.
Yeah,
in
and
the
then being
match.
in that like reverse mount to north-south sort of position for a good bit. I think that shows some domination. So I can understand why, in a very close match that could be enough to take it.
Right.
So I mean, there's no
But
argument.
it's also like the criteria, and we discussed this a lot kind of on the pre-show. Was like, what is your criteria? Like, how heavy do you weigh a submission attempt versus an offensive like positional move versus sustained time in a position working for something versus like a late sub attempt, and how deep each sub attempt was. And it's again, there is an argument to be made either way. I don't think the decision is wrong.
Nope.
I think depending on how you weigh this, either you can easily make it, and this is very rarely this happens. You can easily make an argument for either guy,
for sure.
which is why I'm not like that upset about it. And it's very rare that we have an instance where it's like I can be like, oh, I can easily make the argument either way for either guy.
100%.
That is very, very rare, and I'm actually like, again, I would love to see
Makes
these
for a good
guys go
match.
at it again
Exactly.
because damn, it was a lot of fun, and it's just great jiu-jitsu from both guys. Next match, anything else on that one?
No, that's good.
Okay. Next match, we have Dante Leon versus PJ Barch for the under 80 kilograms title. PJ takes this via judge's decision, and Dante was unhappy about that. And so, so funny enough, I watched this live, and not live, I watched this on the replay the first time, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure. Like, I thought Dante got that. We watched it on the pre-show for us before we did the podcast here, and I was like, ooh, I think PJ might have taken that.
Yeah.
I will need to watch this again. So again, hear my discussion about that with kind of that coloring in there of like, I've watched this twice. I've scored it for both guys. Take that for what it will. It's a pretty close match. It's again.
Could you say that again?
I don't know why the watch keeps doing that. Second time. I got to turn that function off.
Yeah.
So it's a very close match. And then you watched it for the first time and you said,
I thought PJ looked a little more dominant, but slightly. It wasn't such a runaway match. Neither one of them played a lot of negative jiu-jitsu, as people like to call it, which I really appreciated.
Can you just describe that? When you say that, what do you mean?
Generally, I mean, jiu-jitsu, you're generally ground fighting, right? So you're going to have one person on top, one person on bottom.
Right.
The person on top sort of has this impetus to start engaging the person, but you can kind of fake what that looks like. So maybe I'm playing it at the outside near their toe line. I'm kind of just like touching at their knee line to just see what might open up. Maybe I'm just like kind of pushing them side to side, and as soon as they start engaging, I disengage completely.
Right.
And then I re-engage on my own terms, and it makes for a really boring match. That was not the case in this match.
No.
So PJ was on top, I thought, and I'd have to like clock the time. But in my head, in my mind's eye, just watching it one time through, it seemed like PJ was on top for most of the time. And he was not slacking on submission attempts. He was not slacking on trying to pass.
But I think Dante was very happy to be on the bottom here.
Yeah. They were both working. I'm
yeah,
not saying it as if like...
Well, it's an interesting dynamic where you have a guy on top that is actually looking to pass versus an aggressive bottom player that's actively looking to sub on the bottom. There was some fun takedown attempts here. I think the beginning of the match opens up with what'd you call it? You call it like an inside trip or something?
Yeah, it's like Dante does like the Marcelo kind of arm drag to inside trip, but PJ grabs an underhook. Like amazing timing to do this.
Yeah,
like being arm dragged and then still being able to grab an underhook, and then he ends up kind of like cement mixering, kind of like pancaking Dante on his attempt. So he was way too far away because of the underhook to finish the inside trip, so he ends up getting like put on his back, which is like really high level, really hard to
the
avoid.
Timing on it was...
It's an incredible timing.
Reminds me of the timing on like the slow-mo of Hulk stopping Gaudio at ADCC, where it's like he just kind of like it shucks him off and like oh man, how did you possibly time his entry that well to do that?
Yeah.
In the same way, because Dante's quick in this match. And again, we've seen Dante like really, I think, become quicker recently. Like he's really like I think that is something he is working on in the gym. Like leveraging his quickness at 77. And he goes in what would get most guys in that division down.
Oh, for sure.
And you see Barch
it's
step
worked
back
for more than a decade. I mean,
yeah,
it's a pretty high level. I shouldn't call it simplistic, but it's.
I mean, this is what JT Torres uses to win championships.
Yeah, look at the people we're mentioning who do it, like Marcelo, JT Torres. Yeah. These are guys who were like, the
multiple-time champions,
the creme de la creme of no-gi submission wrestling.
Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. It's a really solid move, and to have a counter
Barch goes like, boom, I'm gonna stop this. Turns to the side, and then gets Dante down on like legitimately like a beautiful counter takedown for this was like really, really impressive. And it was like, it felt like a treat to be able to watch that from the camera angle we had.
For sure.
Because it is not something you see very frequently. And it really speaks to like both Dante's wrestling and how good Barch's wrestling is. Because Barch has been on injury. We've only recently seen him come back in ADCC trials and some other events. We've seen him on Who's Number One, but like we're seeing him now more frequently, and he's getting a chance to like, show off his wrestling and his stand-up a lot more. Moments like this really are things that I like to be able to point to. Like, yeah, this is really unique in like this is not something most high-level guys in our sport can do.
Yeah, for sure.
And Barch did it well versus Dante, again, another really high-level guy in the top, who is the champion at 80 kilograms for GrappleFest.
I also think this might have sealed it for Barch in the decision. He had some really good heel hook attempts.
He has like two really deep heel hook attempts. That I didn't think Dante was going to tap to, but had Dante not made the right adjustments here to like push his knee line down and turn.
Extraordinarily patient in clearing the knee line.
Yeah.
I mean, I say patient. It wasn't that he didn't act quickly. It wasn't like he let him grind through this heel hook and like took his time doing it. Yeah. It happened relatively quickly. There's one really good example of it with like a minute or so left. I would say check that one out. He does all of the right things, but it's in a very, like we said before, the same as like the Ash Williams match, a very systematic, very technical approach that this thing is happening. Here is the right answer to how to address that. And I think that was really,
it wasn't
really excellent.
At no point did he scramble. Again, Barch didn't give him an opportunity to scramble out, but at no point did he need to scramble out to escape that. He just like turned, pushed, get my leg free, make enough distance on my hip so that my knee is not going to explode, but also leverage like some of my like toughness and just like comfort in that position.
Yeah.
To like gut through, because a lot of guys
a lesser guy definitely would have freaked out and just tapped.
Yeah, and then to be able to get that. But again, I also thought that Dante had a lot of really good entries as well. Like throughout this match, a lot of great X guard entries and like and spin throughs for the leg for his own knee bars, heel hook attempts, and entries on his. I think he had 2 or 3 good heel hook attempts. That I think one of them was as deep as the one that Barch had, but I think he had more entries overall. But Barch had 2 really strong entries and played more on top and was very, very aggressive in passing while Dante was being very aggressive from the bottom, but Dante passed at one point and swept. And like, this was a great match.
Yeah.
It was a really fun match. And at the end of it, I watched it 2 times. I would have given it to Dante the first time. I would have given it to Barch the second time. I watch a lot of these matches. I don't flip-flop that often when we rewatch something of who I think is going to win. So that kind of speaks to how close it was. What were your takeaways? What was your kind of like thought process for the dynamic of the match and like any other moments that we missed?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things like this is gonna. I know it's gonna seem kind of counter to what I said earlier. We didn't really miss any of this, but I'm just kind of summarizing. It's like if you stay on top and you're engaging the entire time, and you get some good pass attempts in, you get some good sub attempts in. I feel like that's generally going to be enough to win you a decision in a sub-only sort of setting. And I think that's what PJ did. And that's not to take away from Dante. I mean, the reason why PJ's attempts were only attempts were because Dante was doing such a great job firing his own offense.
Right.
So, I mean, it's kind of one of those things. I hate to be like, hey, we rarely see this be a match where you can see it going either way. I do think PJ won, but it was by such a narrow margin that you wouldn't be upset if you said, Leon won.
You can make, again, kind of like the Ash Williams Krikorian match, you can make a compelling argument either way.
For sure.
In this rule set that, like,
just how heavily do you weight submission attempts
versus positional offense versus like the amount of offense you put up and the pace that you push.
Which things do you consider more dominant, etc. Just all of the kind of like what if factors in a match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've talked to GrappleFest before. I did a video years ago, actually, a couple years ago, for basically. It was a video I did on a Grappling on YouTube page that was a kind of one-off video of like how to get on a super fight. Mm-hmm. Basically, hey, you're a new guy in the sport, you're looking to get a jiu-jitsu super fight, like here's what to do.
Sure.
And I actually reached out to a bunch of promoters, including GrappleFest, like, hey, what's your criteria for like what you're looking for guys to win your event? Mm-hmm. And they gave me a whole list of criteria, and it was like really,
awesome.
and there a couple of promotions did as well, but I just remember that GrappleFest was, they didn't like, they had a list of like what they were looking for their athletes and like what they were looking for their style of matches, and it was just it sticks out in my head of like, oh yeah, they do have a criteria, there's defined criteria for these very close matches.
Perfect.
Obviously, like they're picking guys and they're letting them know what that criteria is ahead of time, because you're getting matches on the main card here where guys are pushing, like the title holders here are pushing the action in a way that GrappleFest that makes for interesting close matches with high level guys. Right. So overall, really fun card. It's on Fight. I bought Fight for the year so I can watch a bunch of these pay-per-view. There's some other pay-per-view stuff on Fight. There's some fun things there. Again, Third Coast Grappling's been on Fight for a while. We've covered other events on Fight before. And I like that we are seeing more and more jiu-jitsu events come to Fight, because I like that it gives, people seem to be happy with being there with them. So it is cool. I like that guys are getting paid. And overall, any other thoughts on the event, Austin?
No, it was a pretty good event. I'd say check it out. It shows you a lot of the meta that we're going to see in ADCC coming up here soon. Yeah.
And again, really, there's a huge preliminary card and a main card as well. And there's a bunch of guys that we cover pretty frequently in the UK scene, and again, it gives us a chance to cover and see those UK grapplers. So check it out, look at it. Again, there's a lot of really great talent coming out of Europe and coming out of the UK and coming out of GrappleFest. So take a look at it. It's a lot of fun. So let's see what else we got, Austin. Moving on to our recap of Fight to Win 202. We're just going to cover the main event here. Angel Lopez versus Jonathan. Give me his last name on it. Novaes. This is fun. Again, we've seen Angel for a long time on Fight to Win. I don't think he's ever held a title at Fight to Win, but we've seen him on the main card many, many, many times. Fun match in the gi. Again, I like that Fight to Win. We covered mostly no gi. Actually, everything we covered today is no gi. So it's cool to have a main event that is a gi match. What did you think, Austin?
I thought it was really cool. It's a 6-minute match. There's a decent amount of action. I can do play-by-play if you want. It didn't take that long.
No, it wasn't a super. It didn't go to time. It ended in sub.
Yeah, so it was like a really good foot sweep defense and sprawl from Angel really early on. But about, like a minute in, Janatis hits this really sweet Seonagi that puts him in side control. Angel's able to get back to guard, but Janatis is able to backstep into a pass. And then from there, it's kind of all Janatis at that point. He rides Neon Belly into mount, goes straight to S mount. He's able to isolate an arm, and he gets this 3/4 lat armbar finish with about...
It was a really neat little armbar. I wish we had a different camera on the side, because it was really hard for me to tell, to see exactly, how he was... A lot of the body blocked the arm, and so I couldn't see the arm very well.
And this is my... I shouldn't call it a guess. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's he finished it underneath his armpit, so like a lat armbar.
Yeah, it's like under the guillotine grip, power grip finish on the armbar.
Yeah, if you look at the way he sets it up, it seems like he's trying to overhook that arm through the S mount setup. So in all likelihood, he doesn't. You can see his other hands not switching over to the armbar.
And you wouldn't wing out behind the elbow there to get in front of you.
So it's I'm 99% sure it was a lat armbar, and what I'm calling 3/4 is both of the feet of the person doing the armbar or around the head. So one's in like the neck notch, and the other one's like going across the face.
Yeah,
and you're back healing into both.
It's a really cool finish for a main event fight to win because again, it's not a finish we see very often. And in the gi, you have a little bit extra friction, and it's just
for sure.
It's a really unique finish that you don't see often, and I love that Fight to Win has these sort of matches that get to showcase these sort of. You've seen so many guys like, oh, look at that, like Barry Yoshida comes out and finishes like an assassin choke, and you're like, oh shit, that's wild. I haven't seen Josh Cisneros in the TP choke from 2017. I was like, oh yeah, look at that, like that's a really unique, really fast choke. This is another really cool finish for a main event in Fight to Win, and gives us a chance to cover something in the gi
for sure
today, because it will be the only gi match we cover today.
Yeah.
We were gonna preview Worlds today, but Maine got the dates wrong, so we're gonna preview that next week. Do you have anything else on Fight to Win on that match?
No, it was a really cool match. Yeah. Shout out to both fighters. It was really fun to watch.
Yeah. Also, Seth Daniels fighting back to back on that card.
Yeah.
2 black belt matches. Shout out to you, Seth, holding it down. Can't just say how crazy that is to run an event and then compete in 2 different matches at heavyweight.
Yeah, it's insane.
On your own card. So that's always cool to see Seth stepping up and doing that in black belt. So moving on to the preview section of the show, Survivor Series 2. We have a bunch of fun super fights, as well as we have a quintet-style 5v5 tournament. It's a 6-team 5v5 tournament. We don't have brackets. Actually, I say that. Do we have brackets? Do you know?
I didn't see any.
Did you look on Instagram?
On Instagram, I did not. I'm just looking on Flow here.
Yeah, I realized we pulled it on Flow. Let me pull it up just in case we do.
Okay.
I don't have a bracket right now for how everything's going to be laid out, but so finishers, this is the first one that we're seeing on Flow, and I'm really happy because, again, it's nice to watch. This is a quintet style, so what is quintet style is your whole team has to be under a certain weight, and then it is you put one guy in the mat versus their one guy in the mat. If there's a draw, both people are eliminated. If you get a submission, your guy stays on, you bring out the next person from the other team,
right,
and then you go until one team has no more people to come up.
Right.
And so it makes, I think Alex Viana said it years ago, it was you are losing until you win.
Huh. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
And it tends to foster and make a really, really exciting, action-packed card. I love covering quintet-style events. We have gone out of our way in the past on the show to cover quintet-style events because they typically are like really fun. Like Subversive kind of runs that. And they're the most recent one that we've covered. Parabellum Quintet did that. Quintet itself does that. We saw the UFC put on an event like that. They're overall really, really fun, and typically it gives additional stakes to all of the matches.
For sure.
That I really like. So we also have some fun super fights on the card too. So do you want to go through the super fights first, talk about those, and then do the teams?
Yeah, let's talk about super fights first.
So super fights, we have a 170 match. We have Max Hanson versus Jacob Rodriguez.
Yeah.
J-Rod.
Yeah, Max Hanson's one of the guys who's on Who's Next, if you guys are checking that show out. And then obviously, so is Jacob Rodriguez.
Well, no, he got eliminated.
He did get eliminated, but he's on the first episode of the show.
Right.
And obviously, we know now that he's a trials winner.
He's now in ADCC, so that, like, again, high stakes. I'm excited for this. Finishers always puts on fun. This is the Survivor Series for finishers. They always put on really fun super fights. I actually got to interview Nick Rodriguez on a finisher. Actually, no, I didn't interview him. I talked to him before I had all my interview gear there because we were just doing writing coverage for that event. We weren't actually doing in-person interviews during that show back then. So that's how long we've been covering Nick Rodriguez. But it's cool. I might actually go up to this one because it should be fun. So that'll be a fun match. Looking forward to seeing more of Jacob Rodriguez and Max Hanson. Next one, we have a title defense, Trinity Pun versus Cindy Ung. Really excited to see Trinity post ADCC trials. She did pretty well in trials. I think she runs into Raquel Canuto that was able to, I think it was Raquel Canuto in trials that beat her, but I could be incorrect about that. But Trinity Pun took that title, I think via submission. I forget when she took that on one of the finishers, but always very, very fun. Not as familiar with Cindy, but the finishers guys, it's a 135-pound title. Finishers guys always make very, very exciting title matchups. They have for years and years and years. Gordon Ryan was one of the champions at finishers years ago, so that kind of speaks to the level of talent there. Next match, we also have TJ Larmy versus Brian Paban, 2 kind of more local guys that we're familiar with in the Baltimore, D.C., Virginia, Philly area. So that will be a very fun super fight.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on those?
Not especially. I'm super excited to see some people like local guys getting into it, and then also like female like championship matches tend to bring out the best in a lot of the female grapplers, so I'm really excited to see that too.
Should be fun. So, Team 1, we have Bomdia. Team 2, we have Standard Jiu-Jitsu. Actually, funny, in Standard Jiu-Jitsu, we have two guys. We have brothers, DeAndre Corbray and Gavin Corbray, who we've covered really recently on the show. And then on Team 5 guys, we have John Battle, who we've covered on the show. We have Zach Green. We have Mike Padilla and Andrew Cockle, as well as Pete Shoemaker, all guys we've covered on the show. Mm-hmm. Team ATT, Happy Valley. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to pick guys that we've covered on the show before, the people we're familiar with. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if we've covered anyone on that team. 10th Planet Miami.
Man, 10th Planet's freaking everywhere, dude.
Yeah, I forget who opened 10th Planet Miami.
Sure.
It's one of the guys from Bethlehem opened it.
Okay.
And I forget. I'm blanking on. I look at the guy's face. He's been on a lot of finishers, but it's cool to see him bring his crew up here. Alexander Gomez is on that one. And we have Team Honey Badger presented by Black Hole BJJ, which is Aaron Harris, which is Esteban Martinez, which is Grant Fitzpatrick, Darren Myra, and James Colombo. I think that might be the team to beat. Again, you got Esteban Martinez and Aaron Harris on the same one. Esteban is notoriously near impossible to submit, and Aaron Harris is a beast of a man that's hard to submit. But again, Team Standard as well, I'm kind of leaning on. Team Standard, Team 5 guys are the two teams I think really, with DeAndre and Gavin Corbray, both of those guys had great trials runs. I think both guys made it to day 2, both brothers, which again, that means you have two guys in the top 64 or 32.
Yeah.
Like in the world in those weight classes, that's a tough team to beat. I've also commentated a bunch of Gavin's matches on Copa Virginia and Copa Elite. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to see how he performs. He's been looking and adding I've been covering him. We've been covering him locally on those cards for about a year and a half now, and he's really added a bunch of new tools and skills to his game. So I'm excited to see how he looks on his team.
Yeah, one of the really cool things about this format in general too is to see how they strategize the order of the fighters.
Yeah.
So you may say like, oh, this team's really strong on paper, but they might be a bad stylistic matchup for another team, and the other team knows that, and the rest of the public doesn't. So it's really cool to see on fight night how that plays out. Right. It doesn't always go, the best team on paper is not necessarily the team that always wins.
Oh, yeah, that's kind of what makes it fun. It's like, cool, oh, they're sending Esteban Martinez out. Yeah, we're not going to put our our featherweight out right now. We're going to put our big guy out right now and try to like get him out of here, because our featherweight, may be able to draw him, maybe not be able to draw him. Our big guy probably can't sub him, but we know can get him out of there. Sure. And then, we can put our featherweight in.
Maybe tires him out enough for like our featherweight to come in and finish him off.
Yeah.
Who knows how
There's all different strategies. And they are always really some of the most fun events to watch live because of that, because you can follow the story of like these teams as they go through. Yeah. And you're like, oh, that's the guy earlier that had the really tough match with the giant guy, and then he was able to draw him, or in the last 10 seconds he submitted him, and 100%. He's really tired now, but like he has to go again.
Or even conversely, when there's a guy who goes through and aces a whole team, that's something super special to watch.
Giles?
Yeah, that's something super special to watch. So, I mean, either way, I think that format lends itself towards some heavy drama, or just, or even, I don't know, like every scenario you can think of. If it's just back and forth, one team wins, one team loses, the other team loses, other team wins, like that's really fun to watch too. So, I really like this format for the drama and the intrigue.
You don't necessarily see like the best grappling from all the guys, because it is such a crapshoot of like who you're going to match up with in what scenario. Because I had 2 back-to-back matches where I subbed the guys. I am dead. Sure. And I have a fresh guy that's 40 pounds bigger than me.
Right.
Or 80 pounds bigger than me. You're like, awesome. Good luck, sir.
Right.
So it's like that. Yeah, it's a tough matchup. Versus if in a super fight, that'd be a much more even matchup, or less even matchup, depending on what's going on. Always a lot of fun to watch live. You get an opportunity to watch it live. Watch it live, because the stories for these things are always really engaging and entertaining, and they're always fun to watch. So, and also I'm on vacation that day, so I might go up and watch it.
Hell yeah! So, come say hi to Maine.
Yeah, come say hi to me. I'm the small man in a Grappling Rewind shirt. I think that's all we got. I think we got Worlds preview next week. Am I forgetting anything else, Austin?
Do
we have another fight? I think we have Fight to Win as well next week. But I don't think we have any preview for that right now because I'm not sure who's going to be on that. Yeah, I think that is. Yeah, that's it. And then in a couple of weeks we have Worlds in 2 weeks, so we will Austin and I will preview that next week. Austin has. You've showed me some of the preview stuff that you have already, and I love how OCD you are. I don't know why you
told me to prep for Worlds. It's one of my favorite events, and so I went full OCD mode and started cross-referencing data points that don't need to be cross-referenced.
You pulled, like, in the day, you showed me what you pulled already, and I was like, oh, I'm excited to have you preview this, Austin. I'm happy you're back, because you were just really excited to let all you guys, analytical in a way that I just can't be.
I'm really excited to let all you guys down next week while I look like Charlie Day, like in that meme of him pointing at random things connected to each other that don't need to be connected. Pepe Sylvia, it's everywhere you look. That's going to be me next week, so look forward to that.
So yeah, that'll be next week. Also in a couple weeks in June we have ADCC, the Oceanic and Asian Trials. Super amped for that. We also have Fight to Win 203 that week. That will be fun. So there is no Fight to Win next week. They have on a couple week break. And then in end of June we have Midwest Finisher 7. Again, we've covered them for years and years. They are finally on Flow Grappling, so going to see them on that platform. So yeah, that's it. What do you got going on this week, Austin?
What do I have going on this week?
Anything fun?
So I'm off. I'm on vacation. I get this super sweet beard for a while.
I forgot about that.
I'm just going to be training. It's going to be great.
Yeah, we trained twice today.
Yeah.
I think we rolled 4 or 5 rounds, probably 5 rounds today.
Yeah.
Just us.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of other guys too, but it was intermixed. There were 2 guys off, Austin look at you again, and you're like, yeah. So it's really cool. It's really nice to have you back. We get to work a lot of stuff that you play. You actually play a really similar game to a lot of stuff that I do.
Yeah.
And you can shut down a lot of the stuff that I play because you play a similar game, and it gives me a really good opportunity to just get murdered. And I'm excited.
You're being kind.
I'm excited to have you back.
I'm trying my best.
Yeah, it's good. So you're just hanging out, being on vacation.
Yeah, man. Just training.
I got a week of work, and then we're going up and doing the finishers. So that will be my week. I'm trying to think. I feel like I have something really important coming up, and I'm blanking on what it is, but
it's late.
I'm gonna forget it. So yeah, it's 1:15 in the morning right now. So all right, as always in the show, I'm your host Maine, my co-host
Austin,
and we are the Grappling Ground. Chill on the mats, whatever it is. Stay safe. If you like the show, please consider sharing it on Facebook with the folks at your gym. It's the best way that we grow the show, and we really appreciate it. You can reach out to us on email.
We also have Instagram. We have Facebook. We have Twitter. We have Google+.
Until that shuts down.
We have a website.
If you have an event you would like to have us cover, please let us know. If you have a name, like most people do, and you'd like to have us stop butchering it,
let us know.
Reach out to us. The show is also available on YouTube, Spotify, in addition to iTunes and every other podcast service. We very much appreciate your time, and thank you.